The dandelions are in bloom. There have been a bunch of days past already that I wanted to come out and harvest, but it didn't make it out, and there's rain probably about to come, and it's supposed to rain all weekend. I want to get them before it rains all weekend because I've learned that making wines after a rain isn't the best thing because I think a lot of the yeasts kind of get washed away. So I'm hoping to get 2 gallons of flowers, but if I get a gallon, I'll be happy. And when I harvest, I use a scissors and I just leave behind as much green as I can, but I'm not incredibly picky about it. Last bunch of years, each year it's felt a little bittersweet harvesting the dandelions, because when I first started making the dandelion wine, and that was in 2010, and I'm sure there are people who've been doing it like 50 years longer than that, but even in 2010, the dandelions used to be covered with insects, and it would be kind of a pain doing the wine because I wouldn't want to disturb any of the insects, and the jars would just be full of insects. Everything was full of insects, and now there's like no insects. Each year I've noticed it, like the last bunch of years, so. But it still makes wine. I make the dandelion wine every year, and it's always the first fresh preserving project of the season. It feels like it ushers in the beginning of the preserving season, so I'm happy to be doing this today. You gotta keep picking here, though. You gotta keep doing this, because it might rain. We gotta go home. I'm doing my best to harvest only the flowers that are fully open, so I'm passing over like this flower, this one, if I can help it. If I can't get enough, I'll come back through and then I'll take another pass at ones that are close to open but not quite open. So you really need a big field full of dandelions to make this happen, because you need quite a lot, and it can look from a distance like, oh, there's so many flowers, and when you get up close, many are not fully open. The best is probably to do this on a really sunny day, but this is an overcast day and it just rained a tiny drop, but not much. How life goes. You don't always get the optimal moment. Okay, we finished our harvest, we came home, we had a nap, we had dinner, we cleaned up, we put in the chickies, we gotta go to bed, and we gotta pour boiling water over these flowers. So we're gonna do that right now. We're gonna put the flowers into a crock to then, and there's a little spider in the crock that will allow to move elsewhere before we pour the boiling water in. Pour the flowers into here. It was kind of a more full jar, but they settled. But the recipe that I've followed from the first time I ever made it, has you pick 3 quarts. So I always try to pick a gallon just to go a little overboard. But this is what we got. Don't touch. Don't touch. Hot, 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 hot. Hot, 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 hot. Okay. Hot. Too hot. We're going to cover it and leave it for 2 days, not going beyond 2 days. That's in the directions that I follow, but I think there have been times where I actually have, I think, and it turned out fine. Put a cover on it, and we'll stir it a couple times a day. And that's it for now. We'll come back to it in a couple, well, tomorrow we'll stir it, and the next day, and then we'll move it on to the next phase in a couple of days. Good evening. Okay, come on, ready? We're gonna go to bed. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Here we go. We've gotten through our 2 days of stirring, and now we're going to move this on to the next phase, which is to first bring back to a boil the flowers in the water, and then we'll add some lemon peel and orange peel and sugar and let that cook for a while, and then ultimately strain it and, well, put it back in the crock, and then in a few more days strain it again. So I'm just gonna do this to a boil before I add the peels and sugar. Pot is definitely boiling, and I'm going to add the peels of 2 oranges and the peels of 2 lemons and some sugar. The recipe calls for 3 pounds of sugar. Last year I think I used 2 pounds and it resulted in a pretty dry wine. When I've used 3, it's a pretty sweet wine. I like it somewhere in the middle because I use it just really for cooking. So I think I'm going to add 2.5 pounds of sugar this year. So we'll add that in a second. I've measured out the sugar. I changed my mind. I'm going to do 2.25 pounds of sugar this year. And I have my peels of the fruit grated. And I'm going to add this to the brew. A little hard to do this holding the camera. Sean's outside and he'll come in later and do some more filming, but this part we'll try to just do. I'm going to scrape that in with the camera off. So just doing some music making in the background there, and I'm going to bring this back up to a boil and then turn it down to a simmer and let it simmer for an hour. Back to a boil, and I'm turning it down to a low simmer. The recipe says boil it for an hour, but I turn it down because if I fully boiled it, it would all boil out. So I just kind of check it and keep it so it's still simmering, but it's not hard boil. And we'll come back in an hour. This dandelion wine sugar and the peels have boiled for an hour, simmered for an hour, and now they're going to go back in the crock.
Whoa.
And then I'm going to add the juice of those 4 fruits, the 2 lemons and the 2 oranges. I'll cut them and juice them. Hold on. There's some. And actually, I'm going to add all the pulp too. Give the whatever nutrients are in there for the yeast that are going to come into this. Okay. All this juice and the pulp added, and then we'll let it just sit until it cools a bit before we add the yeast. The brew at this stage is cooling down, and I use a commercial yeast for the dandelion wine, and this is what I have in the fridge, so this is what we're using, and I've used this one before and it's done a good job. It's for sparkling wine. It doesn't make the dandelion wine sparkle, but it does a good job of eating up the sugars and turning it to a nice wine. So we're gonna rehydrate this yeast in like body temperature water before we add it to this brew. So we're just gonna pour it on the water and let it sit for 20 minutes, which is what the instructions say to do, and not disturb it during that time, and then we'll come back. Okay, the yeast is looking hydrated. We're going to add it to this beginning of the brew, and I just pour it on top. I don't stir it all in because I've read in the past when I have been troubleshooting different things, you know, you want it to slowly acclimate to the sugary environment. To stir it all in really fast, it's like not that nice for this yeast. It's been sitting, so it can get involved in its new world slowly. And then and then another thing a lot of the dandelion wine. You can't have those scissors. I'm sorry, but you can come up here. You want this? That's a fun colored thing. So we do use or add in the commercial yeast for the dandelion wine, and one thing I sometimes try and other times don't is adding some sort of nutrient, which a lot of these recipes call for, and it's like they usually call for a commercially produced nutrient. I've tried, I think, adding some of my sourdough starter at one point, like boiling it and then adding that in one year. Most years I've never added anything and it works out great. This year I'm going to try adding some dried elderberries that we have, because they've got a lot of vitamins and minerals, probably amino acids. I think they have nitrogen, which the yeast wants, and not a lot of sugar, so it won't change what I'm up to that much. So I'm just gonna add a bunch in and we'll see what happens this year. I don't know. This is a mystery, so I'm not a chemist or a scientist, but we'll see. We're gonna leave this, and eventually I'll come and stir this in once I feel maybe like the yeast has had a chance to settle in. But you can see the yeast is really bubbling. It's not all totally absorbed, but I feel a little concerned to not incorporate it soon enough that I'd maybe develop the wine would develop sort of off flavors in the tea itself if action doesn't sort of start taking place. So I'm trying to walk in some middle space of not introducing the yeast so fast that they get shocked and not letting them sit forever on the top so that the tea beneath gets too funky. So I'm just going to make the call that I'm stirring it in now to kind of fully maybe incorporate it, just gently. And then we're going to leave this for 3 days and we'll be back, and I guess we'll share this, even though it's a funny place to leave it, just in case people who haven't made dandelion wine before want to use this as a jumping off place for their own experiments. See you in 3 days.